Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 1, for the Xbox 360, /PlayStation 3, /Nintendo Wii with the WiiWare, as well as PC Steam, and finally smartphone devices, including Androids and iOS smartphones. So, last time, we've essentially did manage to traverse into not one, but two zones, which are Splash Hill Zone and Casino Street Zone. In addition to that, we somehow collected 6 kiosk emeralds so far. In addition to that, we also did manage to able to show off one of the levels that's only exclusive to mobile phones, which is essentially 1,000 or 100,000 point challenge, and relatively speaking out, everything else checks out there. So either way, there's one thing I totally forgot to mention about this actually, is about the fact that since we now ended up on the world map screen right here, basically though is about the fact that, well, as far as I'm aware, we can only traverse into 4 different zones at the moment, so you can basically tackle for those specific zones at any time, whatever you wish. And relatively speaking, that was about the fact that it's entirely up to you. But obviously though, we're going to be going for those specific zones in a corresponding order, because after all though, we've already accomplished the first zone as well as the second zone already. So potentially speaking though, we can now proceed on to the third zone. Which, speaking of which, today for this video, is that not only we can able to actually go into the third zone, which appears to be Lost Labyrinth Zone, and maybe potentially with Mad Gear Zone as well, being he forms within a 4th zone in the game. But possibly though, we can also try to expect, we can able to start able to actually decide able to collect the 7th and the final Chaos Emerald in Journey forms of one of those remaining stages as far as I'm usually concerned with. So, yeah, let's get to it with Lost Labyrinth Zone Act 1 right here. And this is obviously inspired by Labyrinth Zone from Sonic 1. So as a result though, it's once again it's going to take place in this Labyrinth ancient ruins, and there's also going to be some water involved. So of course, if you manage to go into underwater, we need to find as many of those air bubbles as we could, and unfortunately though, there's our first death of the playthrough because of this unexpected bottomless pit as we somehow stumbled across into by complete accident. So I think I wasn't paying attention to the forms of the actual specific parts and stuff like that. So anyway, well, despite the fact it has been about quite a few hours ago since I actually have last played this game for sure, but either way. Oh yeah, a few things I want to talk about is about the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 6th of October today, in some cases in 2024 today, so relatively speaking though, is about the fact that we've only got about exactly 5 more days to go until Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is going to be releasing on PlayStation 5 alongside with Xbox Series X and also PC Steam as well. But in addition to that, I believe we've only got about, I would say, we've only got about 11 days to go until Super Mario Party Jamboree is going to be closer to its release. In addition to that though, we've only got about 19 more days to go for the likes of Sonic X Shadow Generations, which as a result though, I believe so far anyway, is about the fact that we've only got about 1 episode left in terms of the forms of Sonic X Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings as part of the forms of the animated prologue just before when the game releases and stuff like that. So relatively speaking, that was about the fact that I'm still very curious to know how episode 3 is going to play out to be, which we'll find out more about it probably at some point until either on next Thursday or exponentially though it's going to be on next Friday for sure. So anyway though, and it's also worth noting for actually, is about the fact that, did you guys know about the fact that it's been about a year ago since that Sonic Frontiers, the Final Horizon was released, since in Journey forms it by the end of September, which I suppose I completely forgot to mention about it ever since in about yesterday roughly, because I already know for a fact that the Final Horizon free DLC update for Sonic Frontiers, that obviously though it did originally came out in the end of September in last year in 2023. And while looking back on it though, I think it's actually alright. I mean, the only painful part about the forms of the Final Horizon though, to me though, is this godforsaken Master Coco's trial, which, let me tell you, I'm not going to touch upon that particular trial ever again. Well, despite the fact though, it's about the fact that I just somehow managed to choose easy mode throughout the majority of that particular challenge, because my god, the timing on that particular parry move is actually way difficult as it sounds, especially concerning for the fact it needs to be exact with that particular timing button presses and stuff like that, which let me tell you, I'm probably not gonna able to think about that particular dreadful moment ever again, especially concerning for the fact it will be pretty much, well, it's hard for me to explain, because I know for a fact it's been about almost entirely a year ago since we've last did our Let's Play of Sonic Frontiers, and by the end of that particular Final Horizon DLC update. So anyway, so as you can tell with that particular level gimmick right here, that basically though, as soon as you're able to try to shove that particular ginormous ball, and basically though, when you hop onto this giant ball, you have to keep your balance until you're able to proceed to the actual level. However though, if you lost balance onto that particular ginormous ball, then obviously though you know exactly what's gonna happen, you will fall and die, so you don't want to let that happen, don't you? So, but luckily we did somehow manage to able to make our way to the very end of the stage with 50 plus rings and stuff like that, so that pretty much leads us to the 7th and the final special stage in the game, and this is without a doubt is the hardest special stage in the game, mainly because as you can tell, this particular special stage is filled to the brim with a lot of bumpers, so as a result though, the bumpers will be your worst enemy in Special Stage 7, alongside with the forms of Special Stage 4 as well. Like, look at it. I've almost got myself screwed over for that particular bumper right there, that if you dare touch any of those bumpers at the very specific point, you might accidentally able to actually hit that estimation marks. So as a result though, thankfully with the actual specific timing with the actual pause button, basically though is about the fact that you can retry as many times as you wanted to, so there's no penalties by doing so. It's just about the fact that this particular sequence right there is just maddening. Especially it's almost like a hard version of Special Stage 1 in one of those specific parts. Yeah, I say specific parts because as far as I'm aware, we have to go for 4 different rooms, because as you can tell, the 7th and the final special stage is locked in the actual specific center of the actual special stage itself, which I do like, but obviously though we need to collect about 99 rings in order to able to open up that particular ring gate, and believe me, what I'm saying is about the fact that whenever I first played this particular special stage, during the forms of my spare own time, not only on the iPhone version, but as well as the forms of other versions of the game as well, it honestly did take me about 10 tries in order to succeed that particular special stage itself, but fundamentally speaking, I was about the fact that, you know, thankfully with the retry option, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. So anyway though, also as far as I'm aware, this will be the last time we get able to traverse into that particular types of special stage like this, where you have to tilt the stage around, while at the same time though, you have to keep Sonic away from those specific obstacles, ranging from bumpers, in addition to that particular crystals and all that stuff. Although, the actual concept of this particular bonus stage like these will eventually make a comeback in Sonic Superstars. So potentially speaking, I was about the fact that while we were originally able to tackle through Sonic Superstars later on in this year, but it might be a bit delayed during at some point in next year, for the sake of the forms of trying to catch up to the rest of these Sonic Let's Plays from now on. So because of that though, because, you know, I've got a lot of things to able to take care of for. So anyway, so we've actually now able to actually unlock the ring gate, and as a result, that pretty much leads us to the final Chaos Emeralds that we somehow finally obtained. So, and much like the forms of how it does it in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, alongside with Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, or technically Sonic 3 standalone and Sonic and Knuckles standalone, basically though, if you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds, well, as you can see on screen, we have now officially became Super Sonic. And what's different about this is about the fact that I believe that because of how the fact that we actually got more buttons to our disposal, so it really doesn't matter what buttons you press. Like specifically on the PlayStation 3 version, you have to press the square button or the triangle button, and I believe on the Xbox 360 version you have to press the X button and the Y button, and meanwhile on the WiiWare version you simply only press the 1 button, because obviously though the Wii remote doesn't have nearly as enough buttons compared to the forms of how it does it on the Xbox 360 controller or the DualShock 3 controller for the PlayStation 3. So I digress. And just like before though, you need to collect 50 rings and you would able to miraculously turn into Super Sonic after all. So either way though, So as you can see, we now ended up on the second act in Lost Labyrinth Zone, or specifically though, the console version of Lost Labyrinth Zone Act 2, because the main gimmick of this particular stage right here, we're actually going to be carrying a torchlight with us, and basically though is about the fact that certain sections of this level is completely dark around here. So basically though, not able to bring certain light into certain segments, well basically though, that's what the torchlight decides to come in. And basically though, you have to lit up those lanterns until you're able to actually see the light, so, or see certain rooms throughout the majority of the stage. Oh yeah, and every once in a while though, is about the fact that much like the forms within Donkey Kong Country games and stuff like that, every once in a while though is about the fact that you can able to actually have a ride on those minecarts themselves, and generally speaking that was about the fact that you simply just try to jump over for those particular gaps and all that stuff, and I honestly have no idea why I somehow fell all the way down to the bottom. Well, mind you, because of how the fact that it can be hard to see in the darkness though, and I've lost my ability to turn into supersonic, which, kind of thinking about it though, specifically in this stage in particular, you can able to actually break the entire level without any sort of issues by simply turning into supersonic, and basically though, you see what I mean if we somehow managed able to keep on collecting rings again, and just to show for the fact that it makes the entire level like this a super duper breeze. So, and yeah, there are a few rare occasional moments that we have to lit up the dynamite to able to blow up certain blocks, not able to progress, so that's something worth noting for anyway. So anyways though, there's also another thing that's worth mentioning for actually, is about the fact that it's kind of unfortunate that one of those famous actors who also passed away, which there are, let's just say Maggie Smith, which she did manage to able to do one of those performers for the sake of the films of the Harry Potter movies, and also there's the films of one of the actors from The Nightmare Before Christmas, which appears to be Ken Page, that both of those famous actors who sadly passed away, and as a result though, it still is pretty sad, especially concerning for the fact I do remember, you know, fondly remembered when it comes to The Nightmare Before Christmas, that Ken Page did manage able to be voiced by, or essentially voice, Oogie Boogie from The Nightmare Before Christmas and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty sad that he passed on. And yeah, as you can see right there, since we actually turned into supersonic, this means we instantly got light for the sake of certain areas. So yeah, that's actually kind of weird, but regardless of such though, is about the fact that the reason why I've decided able to turn into supersonic in this particular Latin puzzle right here, because sometimes though you need able to figure out the correct order for that particular part right there, and fundamentally speaking though, if we use supersonic, then our jump heights will be a lot more higher than I was expecting. So either way though, that's the reason why we somehow managed to go for that particular transformation and all that stuff. So now as far as I'm aware, the mobile version also has a different level type, which as a result though, again we'll show that off after we're done with the forms of the console version of Act 2 of Lost Labyrinth Zone. So either way though, yeah, that's as far as I was expecting. So anyway, oh, there's also another thing worth mentioning for actually, is about the fact that, well, fundamentally speaking, that was about the fact that when it comes to the supersonic theme, as you can tell from that particular music you're going to be hearing for a while, well, that's going to be for about, it's going to be repeated for about a few times per minute, so as a result though, it can be felt a bit repetitive at one point, but regardless of such though, I just want to show you guys how supersonic actually plays out to be during the forms of not only for Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1, but eventually Episode 2, that then again though, we'll get to Episode 2 at some point until 2 weeks time, because as far as I'm aware, we've got a lot of things to show off. So either way though, and I believe this is the last part of the level where basically though is about the fact that we ended up on the minecart again, and as a result though, once we make our way to the very end, well, there you go. And as you can tell, since we've actually collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds up to this point, the special stage ring will no longer reappearing, because obviously we've already done with the special stages in Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. So yeah, that's pretty much about it for Act 2 of the console version of Lost Labyrinth Zone. And now let's move on to the mobile version, where, as I said before, the level gimmick is a little bit different compared to the console version. So instead of utilizing the torchlight, they're able to actually bring up a lot of light for certain areas of that particular stage. So instead, we're going on to the actual minecart ride. In some cases, the strange minecart. So I believe there are two different methods you can able to actually take control of the minecart itself. That you can either decide able to use the gyro sensing controls, or if you're not too comfortable with that control scheme, well, I highly suggest you're able to actually use the touch controls instead. Although it can be felt a bit awkward at times, because obviously though there are a few moments about the fact that we have to keep on swiping the screen back and forth for a little bit, and there might be some other areas, like for instance with this ginormous loop, that we have to keep on swiping the touchscreen downwards, so just in case you can't able to actually directly judge the acceleration of the minecart itself. And as you can see, I somehow activate Supersonic once again, except this time on smartphones. And I found it was very strange about the fact that rather than just hearing the phones of the Supersonic theme, unlike the phones within the console version, so instead we're going to be hearing an invincibility theme on the mobile phone version. So yeah, it's a little bit weird at the same time though, but regardless of such though, it's about the fact that, you know, much like the phones of how it does on the console version, you can still able to actually collect 50 rings, assuming of course about the fact that you do need to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds first. And as a result though, if you notice about the fact that one of those icons did eventually showed up, which appears to be the Supersonic icon, where you can able to actually tap that particular icon, and then that allows you to able to turn into Supersonic, where you'll be invincible throughout the majority of the stage basically. So also, as far as I'm aware, there are a few rare occasions about the fact that we might able to stumble across into certain switches we do need to activate in order to able to progress in this entire stage. So yeah, that's just basically how I can usually think about that, I guess. So but anyway, what I found was a little bit disorientating for this particular version of Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 though, to me though, is that in joining forms of some stages anyway though, that usually features loop-to-loops and all that stuff, you get this very disorientating screen rotation thing, so I felt it was a little bit disjointed. Although, unlike the console version, that thankfully though, the screen rotation thing is not present around here on the console version. So anyway, I digress. So there's also another thing worth mentioning for actually, and that's what it appears to be about the fact that during the informs of around 5 days time now, about the fact that no matter what though, 2 of these games in particular is about to be coming onto the NSO expansion pack, Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack to be more specifically as far as the full name is concerned. And both of those games in particular are not only for the sake of the phones within the Game Boy Advance, but as well as from that though, 2 of those games are entirely related to F-Zero games. So yeah, it's actually pretty cool though, especially that we've somehow now finally got the entire Game Boy Advance F-Zero games trilogy of the Game Boy Advance onto the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack and all that stuff. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell, especially concerning for the fact that all needs left now in terms of these F-Zero games in particular, which appears to be F-Zero GX or F-Zero AX for the arcade machines, which I highly doubt that AX is probably not going to make it onto the Nintendo Switch, I don't think, because as far as I'm aware, that game is basically the arcade version of F-Zero GX, basically. So, anyway, so that pretty much does it for Act 2 of Lost Labyrinth Zone in the mobile version. So, yeah, it's a very strange level indeed, especially concerning for the fact that I don't think we actually come across into any of those bottomless pits on that particular level. So, as a result, though, that level in particular is pretty much a piece of cake. And relatively speaking, though, for my thoughts about the phones of those mobile exclusive levels, they're pretty lousy stages, all things considered. So because of that though, yeah, nothing too special I don't think. So either way though, now let's go ahead and move on to Act 3 of Lost Labyrinth Zone. And as far as you probably already can tell by this point, we're obviously going to be traversing into underwater for the time being. And of course, we do need to able to obtain certain air bubbles in order to survive in underwater. So you're pretty much used to it by now. So either way though, and there's actually that specific gimmick right there. We have to able to do a bit of a tilting puzzle thing right here. And then as soon as you're able to let that particular block decide to able to release out of the hull, not only you can able to actually continue going forward, but it's also about the fact that the water itself will be out as well. Although So there might be a couple of times though, oh wait a second, this section looks familiar, which appears to be almost inspired by Hydro City Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 3, or Sonic 3 and Knuckles to be more specifically, because we're getting chased by that particular shifting wall, and as to be expected, if we get crushed on that particular shifting wall, we will die automatically. But this time around though, it's about the fact that it takes place in a different environment, so yeah. Anyway, there's also another thing worth mentioning for us. Speaking of which though, is about the fact that when it comes to F-Zero 99, F-Zero 99 has recently got its new update, which this time around though is now onto version 1.5.0, which does manage to bring us into new additions, like for instance, some more tracks will be added, such as for instance, we're about to be getting Mute City 4, as well as Sand Cyclone 1, Big Blue 2, Sand Cyclone 2, and Silence 2. And there's also going to be some more additional stuff here and there as well. Like, for instance, that the new tracks have been adjusted for F-Zero 99. Practice mode has been expanded for that you can practice by unlocking the Ace League tracks. And there's also the fact that a Grand Prix Ace League tab has been added to the leaderboard, and there's also the fact that when it comes to the Ace Leaked track, information has been added to tracks and prix under records in the workshop. And there's also going to be, well, if you do manage to able to complete the Grand Prix Ace League, you're able to receive a decal with the motif of the BS F-Zero Grand Prix machine, which I think that could be something more related to the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom Satellaview or something like that. Mind you, about the fact I haven't exactly looked upon that much of information of F-Zero for quite a while, until now anyway, because as far as I'm aware, like I said this before, that we're about to be getting ourselves the final two F-Zero games for the Game Boy Advance for the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack, and those two games are F-Zero GP Legend, as well as F-Zero Climax, which appears to be the Japanese exclusive for some time. So yeah, it's actually pretty awesome about the fact that, well, we've already got ourselves F-Zero Maximum Velocity ever since in about a couple of months ago, but now we've somehow got two final F-Zero games on the Game Boy Advance to that particular library. So yeah, that's actually pretty awesome. So, and as far as I'm aware, it's going to be releasing at some point on the 11th of October, around this exact same time as the final episode of Sonic X Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings, which appears to be to the ARC. So yeah, that's actually pretty swell, I might say. So either way though, despite the fact though about the fact that we've already got F-Zero GP Legend back then, specifically though the physical cartridge version, and on top of all that stuff though, we've already got F-Zero Maximum Velocity as well, but we haven't exactly got F-Zero Climax, because as far as I'm aware, that game was exclusive to Japan. So as a result though, I really do wish if I want to get that game a bit of a chance to able to experience it, well, assuming of course about the fact I do need to find a way to able to actually play through the game within an English translated version. So as a result though, yeah, there's nothing else I can really add around here. So no! Ah, dang it, we got crushed. Ah, jeez, this boss might be felt to be extremely tricky, but basically though, in this particular boss fight, it looks very familiar in the beginning, because obviously though, we have to once again chase after Dr. Eggman, while at the same time, that the water starts to rise. But thankfully though, in the second half of the fight, starts a little bit differently this time. So basically though, it's about the fact that, well, thankfully this particular part is nowhere near as hard as the forms of how it does it in Sonic 1, because obviously though, we now have the homing attack, and on top of all that stuff, that you can pick up speed really easily. So yeah, that might be the lack of challenge basically. So but I digress. So either way though, and yeah, if you make your way to the end right here, basically though, is about the fact that we now on the second phase of the fight. Now if you stand on that particular side right there, you can able to actually get yourselves an extra hit on Dr. Eggman into when the actual second phase of the fight starts. So basically though, is about the fact that in this phase right here, this is where the actual boss fight itself gets a lot difficult. Like basically though, you really don't want to get crushed by those particular pillars from each side, because obviously though, is about the fact that you have to judge the actual specific timing jumps and what have you, until you're able to get a chance to hit Eggman. So, but there he goes. So, thankfully though, it only took me about 2 tries, because unlike the first attempts though, it didn't go too well to me though. But either way though, but that's not to say about the fact that we are still basically not done with the actual boss fights just yet though, because obviously though, we'll have to find out during at some point until, well, let's just say until next Saturday, presumably speaking though. And look how ridiculous amount of points that we somehow got from that particular time bonus. And gee, no wonder why that this game is actually super duper generous with us when it comes to obtaining the insane amount of extra lives. So anyway, so that pretty much does it for Lost Labyrinth Zone, and now let's move on to Mad Gear Zone Act 1. And if you couldn't tell what this level is almost inspired by from, well, this is obviously inspired by Metropolis Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, like this familiar set pieces, and on top of all that stuff though, something tells me we might able to actually bump into familiar enemies as well. So, I wonder if it could be possible about the fact that, well, there's one of those enemies right here, which appears to be shell crackers, and there's also going to be some, astronauts, and worst of all, out of them all though, it will be something a little bit more suspicious around here. So either way though, I'm sure about the fact that this stage will be a total cakewalk this time around though, because obviously though it's about the fact that, again, with the homing attack and all that stuff, and usually potentially speaking though, it's about the fact that what I felt was a little bit kind of bizarre about this sometimes, and that's what appears to be about the fact you notice with one of those, oh no, slicers, why did you able to come back? Oh, wait a second, that the slicers are now with a total joke now because of the forms of the homing attack, so they're nowhere near as, like, painful compared to the forms of how it does it on not only for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but as well as Sonic Pocket Adventure as well, because obviously though they managed to bring back certain familiar badniks from the likes of Sonic Pocket Adventure as well, but I digress. So, anyways though, speaking of which though, I did somehow manage to able to find out, in regards to the forms of some more information has been added, for the sake of the forms of Super Mario Party Jamboree recently, although, I'm afraid to tell you for this point, we're gonna have to able to wait on that for the next day, because I'm pretty sure that we'll let Maxie will mention more about it during at some point when he goes back on playing through Luigi's Mansion 2 until for tomorrow, and it's especially noticeable concerning for the fact that, like what Joy and Silver the Hedgehog have already mentioned about this ever since Enduring Forms of on Wednesday, the actual uploading schedules when it comes to 2 of those games in particular will be changed at one point, because as far as I'm aware, that Maxie is almost going to be finishing up everything for Luigi's Mansion 2, or technically Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, or Luigi's Mansion 2 HD to be more specifically, because obviously that was about the fact that with the quality and all that stuff, so... But anyways though, yeah, you see those enemies that we keep on hitting, which appears to be bubbles, which those enemies did originally came from Sonic the Hedgehog 3, by the way. Those bubbles are pretty much pathetic in this game, alongside with the forms of in Episode 2, because there might be a couple of times though about the fact that if you come across into some parts throughout the levels, basically though you have to keep on doing some homing attack chains with those bubbles, so as a result though, well, the blue ones are pretty much pathetic for the most part, because they are basically becomes like Goombas from the Sonic universe, and it's especially noticeable. There are some red variants as well, but usually for the red variants, they somehow managed able to bring out spikes, so yeah, that's something you have to watch out for, basically, as we saw from the likes of the forms of Lost Labyrinth Zone, basically. So either way, now let's move on to Act 2 in Mad Gear Zone, and yeah, this place is filled to the brim with a lot of familiar gears ever since in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and I believe that the level gimmick on this particular act, as far as I'm aware, that we have to come across into the bigger gears, so potentially though, like, we're able to discuss more about it if we somehow come across into one, so but I digress though. So either way though, also as far as I'm aware, about the fact that I believe we've only got about, well, specifically for those of you who lived in the UK, that I believe we've only got about, I would say 12 days to go until the Wild Robot is going to be releasing on a big screen on the cinemas in the UK version, because I already know for a fact that the American version has already existed for the sake of the forms of the actual, the cinemas release, but I'm still very curious to check that film out, especially concerning for the fact that so far, it did somehow claim the best reviewed movies so far made by DreamWorks. So yeah, it's actually gone pretty smoothly for certain films so far for DreamWorks. Like, for instance, the previous highest review score so far, which appears to be Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, because of the evolves the art style and all that stuff. And now we're about to be receiving yet another highly received movies for DreamWorks, which this time around though what appears to be The Wild Robot. So yeah, I'm very curious able to check that film out, assuming of course about the fact that we have to wait for a little while until when it's going to be releasing, and during at some point a day after Super Mario Party Jamboree was releasing. So yeah, it's kind of a strange release when it comes to not only a DreamWorks movie but as well as the Mario Party game basically. So either way, so as you can see, we actually come across this particular gimmick where basically though we have to like utilize that particular cog gear wheel, and basically though it's about the fact that we can't able to actually just to like go either to the right or down, assuming of course about the fact that depending on what direction you go into. However though, if you try to utilize Supersonic with that particular segment right there, you can able to make this process a lot faster. So for instance, if we come across into this particular gear right here, and if you go likely to the left, then obviously the gear will instantly go to the right, so you have to go for this opposite direction until when that gear decides to able to take you to. That way, if you use Supersonic, well obviously though, as I said before, it makes this entire process a lot faster. So oh god, there's a bunch of slicers there. But thankfully though, those slicers will self-destruct if they somehow manage to get rid of those particular blades. So yeah, that's something worth noting for. So either way though, I suppose that pretty much does it for this level. So yeah, we can now safely to say, we can now able to actually complete certain stages with a total breeze, all thanks to the forms of Supersonic. Because let's face it though, I just want to get this game finished before we move on to episode 2, and potentially speaking of just before, you know, Sonic X Shadow Generations is almost going to be releasing at some point. So, but I digress though. Oh jeez, Impending Doom, the Act 3 of Mad Gear Zone. So, I believe this level's gimmick right here is that similar to the forms of how it does in one of those segments as we done earlier, from the likes of in Lost Labyrinth Zone. Basically though, we get chased by the forms of that particular shifting wall. Except this time around though, we might able to come across into that segment for about a grand total of 3 times. So, yeah, if you get crushed at any point, then you have to restart that particular segment again. Thankfully, there are plentiful of checkpoints, so just in case about the fact you don't want to die too many times. So, potentially speaking of, that's as far as I can say about the forms of, oh jeez, I totally forgot about these things here. That if you try to tilt the actual specific thing right there, that way you can able to actually try to able to, you know, judge Sonic's rolling ball animation into that specific safe spots. So, but anyways though, also, speaking of which though, is about the fact that I'm pretty sure we've only got about 2 more months left now until Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, is going to be releasing. So I'm still basically excited for that film still. And as far as I'm aware, is about the fact that we've only got about to realize about the fact that the UK's version of the film, we're expecting to be able to get ourselves the forms of the custom-made black card before the actual film starts with the age rating system. Though as far as I'm aware about the fact, I'm pretty sure about the fact that the actual the contest will about to be closed at some point on the 22nd of November, so that's going to be on Friday. Although it still is opening right now for that particular contest, for that particular BBFC Create the Card competition in 2024 for the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 themed. And as far as I'm aware, there are a few rules about this. Like, for instance, it needs to be bright, colorful designs that fill the box will produce the best results. And also no glitter. And also there's the forms of please don't fault the artwork, use staples or sellotape. And avoid metallic finishes over huge or large areas, to be more specifically. Although I would have liked able to explain more, but I suppose about the fact that we'll let Maxie will explain more about that particular rules until when, you know, he goes back on playing through Luigi's Mansion 2, basically. So either way though, and like I said as before, is about the fact that the uploading schedules has been changed slightly between both Luigi's Mansion 2 and The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening Remake. So to be expected that Luigi's Mansion 2 is now now going to be on every Mondays and Fridays up to this point so far. And meanwhile, for The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening Remake, it's going to be on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from now on, just to ensure for the fact that hopefully, though, Raid the Flying Squirrel will definitely catch up onto that game. So, and also as far as I'm aware, that I believe, from what I've heard anyway, that both Joy and Silver the Hedgehog have basically snapped out not only Maxi, but as well as the forms of Raid the Flying Squirrel as well, just to ensure for the fact that they'll easily forget about the forms of Mario Kart Tour's Let's Plays plans, because as far as you already know, that particular playthrough of Mario Kart Tour, as far as I'm aware, has officially been cancelled or potentially not happening, just because not only is it incredibly tedious for this editing process, but it's also, as far as I'm aware, I do not like that game anymore, especially considering that we've now actually got the superior Mario Kart game after all, which appears to be, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Nintendo Switch, basically, because we've now got gem pack full of characters and gem pack full of racetracks as well, because of the existence of the Booster Course Pass. So, but anyways though, and gee, that particular boss fight looks familiar because it's obviously inspired by the boss fight from Metropolis Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but that doesn't end off here, because as soon as we get onto the forms of the second phase of the fight, we have to chase down Dr. Eggman, and as a result, sometimes though, Dr. Eggman decides to able to throw dummy bombs right at us, and basically though, I believe there are 3 different types of those dummy bombs that features Eggman in the cockpit, and basically the grey ones are pretty normal speed. However, the blue ones, as you can see, that it just moves a lot faster, and there's also this large yellow one, which is pretty impossible to avoid. But thankfully though, we did somehow manage to beat this boss fight with no rings at all. So yeah, that was the definition of the close call. So yeah, I suppose, with all that being said, folks, is that we get endings off this point right here if we somehow hit the animal capsule. So there we go. So yeah, that pretty much does it for this point. So yeah, join me next time for more of Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. Is that we're about to finishing up Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 by going into the final zone in the game, which appears to be X Station Zone. So I'll see you guys until next weekend.